Today, we're diving into a really powerful idea from the psychologist Carl Jung. It's this concept that our life isn't just one long road, but two completely separate journeys. And honestly, once you see it this way, it can totally change how you think about your past and, more importantly, your future.
So let's start with a question that, might hit a little close to home. Have you ever worked really hard for something? Maybe you've hit all the big life goals. You got the career, maybe the family, you feel secure, but there's still this, this nagging feeling that something's missing. Well, if you've ever felt that, you're not alone. And Carl Jung had a pretty incredible explanation for why that happens.
He basically said our life isn't one single straight line of progress. Nope. He saw it as being split into two very different halves, and each half has a completely different mission. So let's break that down, starting with the first journey. Okay, so the first half of life, this is all about building our place in the world. It's the journey of creating our identity out there for everyone to see. Jung saw this playing out in a few key stages. When we're little kids, our sense of self, our ego, is pretty much just a mirror of our parents. Then comes puberty, which he called our psychic birth. It's that moment when childhood fantasies start to fade and reality hits. And that catapults us into young adulthood, where our focus gets super clear. It's all about external goals, right? Getting an education, launching a career, maybe starting a family. So to sum it up, this whole first half is almost entirely focused on the outside world. We're living in our conscious mind, we're acting in an extroverted way, and the main goal is to achieve, to build, to create a secure foundation for ourselves. But what happens once that foundation is built? Well, that brings us to the big one, the famous, and let's be honest, often misunderstood midlife crisis. But Jung saw this not as a breakdown, but as a breakthrough. It's a totally necessary shift in gears. And he got pretty specific about it, too. He noticed this transition kicking in for most people somewhere between the ages of 35 and 40. It was a time of huge personal crisis for him, and he saw the exact same pattern in his patients over and over again. He said his patients, people who had done everything right, who had achieved everything society asked of them, they all came to him describing this exact same feeling. They just felt empty. The adventure was gone, life had just lost its meaning. The very goals that used to drive them now felt completely hollow. But here's the absolute key to this whole idea. Jung said this feeling is not a sign that you've failed. It's actually a sign that you've succeeded. You've accomplished the mission of the first half of your life. The problem is, all that energy you were using to build your external world, well, now it has nowhere to go. It needs a new direction, a new purpose. And that new direction requires a complete 180-degree turn in our priorities. The focus has to shift from the external world to our inner, subjective world. Our whole attitude has to move from extroversion to introversion. We start listening less to our loud, conscious mind and more to the whispers of our unconscious. And our values shift from the physical and material to the spiritual and intuitive. It is a massive rebalancing act. And it's that rebalancing that kicks off the great work of our second journey, the journey inward, the path to becoming a whole person. Now, the fancy term Jung gave this process is individuation. It sounds complicated, but all it really means is reaching a state of psychological health by integrating every single part of yourself, the conscious and the unconscious, the good and the, well, not so good, into one unified whole. To put it even more simply, the goal here is to finally become the individual you were always meant to be. The person hiding underneath all the roles and expectations you picked up during the first half of your life. So the big question is, how on earth do you actually do that? Well, it sounds pretty abstract, I know, but Jung actually laid out 3 major steps to guide us on this inner journey. It starts with seeing past the social mask we all wear. Then it's about having the courage to face our own dark side. And finally, it's about integrating the parts of ourselves we often try to push away. So, step 1, we have to dethrone the persona. The persona is just your public personality. It's the social mask you wear, the good employee, the dutiful parent, the reliable friend. In the second half of life, the work is to realize that this mask is not who you truly are. And the goal is to start connecting with the genuine self that's been hiding underneath it all along. Okay, next up, we have to acknowledge our shadow. This is the part of us we like to pretend doesn't exist. Our selfishness, our anger, our more primitive instincts. The goal isn't to start acting on these things, but just to accept that they exist. Jung believed that when we stop fighting this part of ourselves, we actually reclaim all that energy, and it comes back to us as spontaneity, creativity, and a real sense of vitality. And this brings us to the final step. And Jung himself said this was the hardest one. It's integrating what he called the anima and animus. Really, this is about balancing the masculine and feminine energies that exist inside all of us. So for a man, it might mean integrating his capacity for tenderness and emotion, his anima. For a woman, it might be integrating her capacity for assertiveness and logic, her animus. It's not about erasing gender. It's about becoming a psychologically complete person who has access to all these different human qualities.
So, when you put it all together, the whole point of this second massive journey is to find harmony. It's about no longer being so one-sided. It's about uniting all these opposing forces inside you to finally become a complete, whole, individuated person.
And that kind of leaves us with one last question to think about. It doesn't really matter if you feel like you're in the first half of life or the second. This idea is such a powerful lens to look at yourself through. It asks us to look inside and just wonder, what part of me have I been ignoring? What part of my inner world is just waiting to be explored?